in this way. And as urban poet Kendrick Lamar says, we're going to be right. We're going to be all right.
Are we though? Are we going to be all right? Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and yes, it is time for Status of the Nation. Now today I'm going to be talking to you guys about the budget speech. Now by now everybody's heard the budget speech, everybody kind of knows what is going on, but I thought I would highlight a couple of key things within the budget and kind of just give you my take and my opinion about it all, and just to see how it's all gonna play itself out over the next couple of months. Now, the big story by now is that we all know that VAT has been increased. So, leading up into budget week and, of course, budget speech day, there had been a lot of talk. There had been a lot of whispers that VAT was going to increase. And I almost feel like all the talk and the chatter was basically done in a way to kind of prepare everyone for when it happens so that it's not so jarring and people aren't as shocked. But there was a lot of talk. So, I think when the increase happened, no one was really that surprised because we had been talking about it for so long. Now, I want to give a quick, very basic, without any technicalities, about how VAT works. So basically, people see VAT as a tax on consumption of goods and services, and it's levied on the supply of goods and services by a vendor in the furtherance of an enterprise. So that's the most basic definition of what VAT is. Now, when I explain it to people in the most basic term, there's output VAT and there's input. Output, I think about it like this. If you're a supplier and you're supplying goods and services to people, you charge output VAT. Now, as a recipient of these goods, I can claim back that output, but to me, it's called input, if that makes sense. Now, the supply of goods and services can be one of three things. It can be standard rated, which currently we all know standard rated will now mean 15%. It can be zero rated. Now, zero rated means that when I supply these goods to you, my output VAT is at 0%, but you, as the recipient or as the vendor, if you're making zero-rated supplies, you can claim back that input, if that makes sense. Exempt supplies basically means that I, as a supplier, can't charge VAT, and you, as a recipient, can't claim input VAT. So it's 0-0 on both sides. It's basically how it works. Like I said earlier, when Malusi Gigaba announced that VAT was going to increase, no one was really surprised. But I think the thing that people need to remember is that this increase in VAT and all the other taxes isn't excess money that we're going to be having. It's basically just to cover the shortfall. So it's not like this is excess money that we're going to be getting, to put into investments and increase revenue. It's going to go into none of that. It's going to cover the shortfall. And you have to remember that we have free education and we have NHI. So this money is going to be going more into that than really into new investment. The thing about VAT, and I think I've said this before, is that VAT is a very political type of tax because it's the type of tax that affects everyone, right? So if you think about the income tax brackets, those affect us at different levels. So depending on your level of outcome, you'd pay more, others would pay less. But VAT doesn't discriminate. It's something that affects all of us. And the reason why it's political is because of the fear that VAT would impact poor people the hardest. They would be hardest hit. So when Malusi Gigaba was in Parliament and he was delivering his budget, he said that, there's all of these zero-rated goods. All these zero-rated goods, are a good thing because they will limit the impact that poor households are going to feel. Now, the thing to remember about this list of zero-rated goods is that there are 19 items on this list. So in his speech, he mentions that, brown bread, mealie meal, and rice and dried beans. But poor people don't live on those foods alone. And I thought it was incredibly short-sighted of him after, announcing this increase to say, well, poor households are going to be protected because, there's this array of zero-rated goods. That's not the case. And I almost feel like we shouldn't be saying this, but here we are. Poor households don't live on bread and cabbage and bap alone. That's not what this is. There's a whole list of things that, people need to survive, and these goods aren't being zero-rated. So the effect on the poor, and them thinking that they were limited by these zero-rated goods makes no sense to me. And I can understand why for so long it was left alone and it was this big political issue, if you will. And I mean, we're already at the point where food is expensive. Heck, almost everything in this country is expensive. So, I mean, take something like eggs, for example. Eggs are zero-rated, but you walk into a Pick n Pay or a Checkers or whatever it may be, and you try buy a tray of 30 eggs, you'll see how expensive it is. So zero rated or not, food is just generally expensive. And now you're saying that on the zero rated list, there's only 19 items, but everything else is going up. It's like, where is this limiting of the impact on poor people? I, for one, don't see it. And like I said, the thing about, increasing all of these taxes, it's not excess revenue that's going to be used, for investments, that's going to generate revenue for the fiscus. The reality is that things are expensive. People will buy less. The economy will go at a slower rate. Fewer taxes will be collected. There'll be a tax shortfall. It's almost like this cycle is just repeating itself. And I feel like we're at a point where no one is telling us how we're going to get out of it, but we're just being told that taxes are increasing. But no one is telling us that, okay, if we're finding ourselves in what looks like a repetitive cycle, how we're going to get out of it. No one knows. I saw a lot of commentary where people were saying that this is a Robin Hood budget. And that, I suppose, effectively they're saying that government was taking from the rich and giving to the poor, but I don't see how that is. Yes, look, for the rich, the rules are slightly different. There's wealth taxes, if you want to look at it that way, in the terms of luxury goods. So, there's added tax on luxury goods. What else? Estate duty is also going to increase. So a lot of those things are going to be happening for the wealthy, if you will. And because they're in the top income bracket, there's been no relief for them. But I still wouldn't go as far as calling it a Robin Hood budget, just from where I'm standing. So the thing about this increase in VAT is, if this is the way they decide to use it, it could partially pay for free education. We know that the budget has set aside 57 billion for first-year students starting this year. Interesting thing to note about that is that this is the single largest reallocation of resources towards government spending. So I think another way that the government or Treasury felt that they were protecting the poor was when they were telling us that, social grants are also going to increase. So I think the disability grant is now 1,695. Child grant is 405, and I want to say the foster child grant is 960. So this was them saying that, look, we've increased these grants, so, and on top of these zero-rated goods, poor people should be fine. But I almost think that when we talk about the budget, people never really take the time to talk about purchasing power. So I was telling someone that I remember when I was in high school, my dad used to give me 10 rands to go to school with. And I remember I would be able to buy a pie, I'd get a packet of chips, and I'd get sweets that I'd put in my pocket blazer and eat in class. That's what I would get. But now, obviously, 10 rands doesn't get you the same. So I'm almost wondering, did they consider what the purchasing power of these increases are? Of which some of these social grants only went up by 20 or 30 rands, right? With all of the VAT increases and everything else that's going to be happening, I'm like, can we really honestly say that whatever is going to be happening is not going to affect the poor because, zero-rated goods, impact is limited, plus we've increased social grants, so it should be okay? I don't see how. Now, in a radio interview, I think it was with 702, Eunice Karim, who is the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance, basically said that, ANC or ANC members didn't want this VAT increase because there is an understanding, or they felt that, this would impact the poor the hardest. They would be hardest hit by this. He also spoke about how, ANC alliance partners, COSATU and SACP, also were not for this because they were thinking about the poor households that are going to be affected by this increase. He also mentioned that he was glad that it wasn't a 2% increase because at some point there was talks and whispers that it would be a 2% increase, but 2% in the sense that VAT would be 15 and the zero rating on fuel would be taken away. So that would sort of be the 2%. But he said that, I guess that there's a sense of relief that it didn't end up being the 2%. But he mentioned something that I thought was very interesting, and I think it speaks to my earlier point. He said that he wasn't sure if Treasury had done, the necessary cost study, if you will, to see what the real impact of this would be on households. Because that's also my question, what is the real life effect, real life impact of these taxes going to be, on poor households is really my question. And of course, opposition parties have come out to say that, they don't support this increase and that VAT is a regressive tax in nature, and that, it's not just these zero-rated goods, but there's a number of goods that people buy that are not going to be exempt. But Eunice Karim did mention that Parliament would be meeting with Treasury in the hopes, like I had said earlier, of maybe expanding this list and adding more items onto this list, basic items that people really need to survive onto this list, to maybe truly then say that they're limiting the impact rather on poor households. But in all of this, Eunice made a very interesting point, which I understand because I've seen that people are angry about this. He basically said that, his biggest concern, yes, they're concerned about VAT and everything that's going on, but he basically said that he wanted to know what the VAT was going to be used for, and what then is being done about corruption, in this country, what then is being done about these illicit cash outflows that are essentially, robbing the fiscus, and what is going to be done to bring that money back into the state's pockets. I think he was basically saying overwhelmingly what is going to happen with that, because there is a sense and there is a belief that poor people and the rest of the republic, if you will, are being punished for what's been happening in the country over the past couple of years in terms of corruption and, money that's been spent recklessly and all of these things. It's like, what is going to be done about that so we don't find ourselves in this particular place? I mean, it's the same thing with SOEs. People feel like it's a waste of state resources, that these entities are continuously being bailed out, at the expense of the fiscus, because this money has to come from somewhere, So it's a lot of these questions that people are asking, and I get it. I get why people are asking the questions that they're asking. I think my feeling is that no government can tax its way into prosperity. It's just not something that can be done. And the overwhelming feeling since the budget has been delivered is that poor people are essentially paying for the mistakes, and the wrongdoings of other people. And not just poor people, everybody feels that we're paying because of leadership that we had before and all the wrong things that were going on, but we now have to settle this bill. And there's, great feeling that this is completely unfair. Because, another example is that the fuel levy is also going up. People who take public transportation, what does that mean for them? I don't know. I honestly don't know what to make of this budget, just in terms of this aspect. This is the one that everybody's going to be talking about for a while, and this one is not going to go anywhere. And I think the increase in VAT, and these wealth taxes and, increase in fuel levy and all of these different things, I think the real effect of these we're going to see, as the months go by. I think for now, like right now, obviously we don't know what that looks like. And because, we haven't even been provided with, a study to say, here's a real life example of what it will look like and how it's going to impact a household of X income who buys this types of food and groceries. We don't know that either. So I don't know. I honestly don't know. I suppose the good thing that's come out of this budget is the projected growth. That they're projecting that we'll grow at 1.5%, which is good compared to last year. I think in terms of growth overall, maybe not so much. And I know, speaking of that quickly, that people talk about, if you compare it with other countries, it's fairly low. I think that's fine to want to compare it that way, but I think we need to also be honest in how we compare it and look at it holistically, not just look at it in terms of numbers to say, well, South Africa's had the lowest VAT, just bump it up like the other countries, it should be fine. I think we need to have honest critique with that as well. But yeah, that's my take on, I suppose, the hot topic of the budget. And like I say, we'll see as the months go by how this pans out, and we'll see if this does anything really in terms of the election, because for the longest time the reason why the ruling party didn't want to touch VAT is because it affecting the poor the most, and they were concerned about how that would translate into votes. But we will see. Thanks for tuning in, and we will keep a close eye to see how this all plays itself out and how it ultimately affects the Republic. And, you know, like I say, these aren't the only or main topics in the budget, but I know that this is the ones that people are talking about right now. And all the other policy things in the budget, I think over time, people will see them unfold, and we'll talk about that when that happens. But yeah, thanks guys for watching. See you on the next one. Bye.